The HOA Karen screamed in court that my cancer patient wife should be euthanized for being a burden on society. She demanded the death penalty for having cancer. Then I stood up, showed my FBI badge, and watched her face turn white as federal agents walked through the door. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My name is Agent Michael Stevens, and I've spent 15 years hunting down the worst criminals in America. Drug cartels, human traffickers, white-collar criminals who steal millions from innocent families. I thought I'd seen every kind of evil there was. I was wrong. The worst evil I ever encountered was wearing a floral dress and living 3 houses down from my wife and me in Sunset Ridge Estates. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. 6 months ago, my wife Rebecca was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. The woman who had been my rock for 12 years, who supported me through every dangerous case and sleepless night, suddenly needed me to be her rock. Rebecca is a high school English teacher. She's the kind of person who stays after school to help struggling students, who uses her own money to buy books for kids who can't afford them, who lights up every room she enters with her smile and kindness. When the doctor said the word cancer, I watched that light dim in her eyes. "We'll fight this together," I told her, holding her hand in that sterile hospital room. "Whatever it takes." The treatment plan was aggressive. Chemotherapy every 2 weeks, radiation 5 days a week, multiple surgeries. Rebecca would need months of recovery time at home. I requested a temporary transfer to desk duty so I could take care of her. My supervisor, Agent Sarah Martinez, approved it immediately. "Family comes first, Mike," she said. "The Bureau will be here when you're ready to come back." What we didn't know was that our neighbor, Patricia Whitman, was about to make our fight against cancer look easy compared to the battle she was planning to wage against us. Patricia Whitman was the HOA president of Sunset Ridge Estates, and she ruled our neighborhood like a dictator rules a small country. She was 62 years old, with perfectly styled gray hair, expensive clothes, and a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. Patricia lived alone in the biggest house on our street. Her husband had died 5 years earlier, leaving her a substantial inheritance and nothing to do but terrorize her neighbors. She had been HOA president for 8 years, and in that time she had driven out 6 families with her constant complaints, fines, and harassment. Anyone who didn't meet her impossible standards became her enemy. Rebecca and I had managed to avoid Patricia's attention for the 3 years we'd lived in Sunset Ridge. We kept our lawn perfect, painted our house regularly, and followed every HOA rule to the letter. But cancer changed everything. Rebecca's chemotherapy started in March. The side effects were brutal. She was exhausted, nauseous, and weak. Some days she could barely get out of bed, let alone worry about yard work or house maintenance. I did my best to keep up with everything, but I was working reduced hours and spending most of my time taking care of Rebecca. The lawn wasn't perfect anymore. The flowers in our front garden weren't as bright as they used to be. Patricia noticed immediately. The first complaint letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, typed on official HOA letterhead. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Stevens, it has come to our attention that your property is not meeting the standards required by the Sunset Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Specifically, 1. Your lawn has brown spots and appears to be dying in several areas. 2. Your flower beds contain dead or dying plants. 3. Your mailbox needs repainting. 4. Your driveway has oil stains. You have 14 days to correct these violations or face fines of $50 per day for each violation. Sincerely, Patricia Whitman, HOA President." I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. Rebecca was fighting for her life, and Patricia was worried about brown spots on our lawn. But I went out that weekend and fixed everything on her list. I figured it would be the end of it. I was so naive. Over the next month, Patricia found new things to complain about every few days. Our garbage cans were visible from the street for 30 minutes after pickup. Rebecca's car was parked, improperly, in our own driveway. The medical equipment delivery truck stayed in our driveway for 20 minutes. Our porch light was too bright and disturbing the neighbors. Each complaint came with threats of fines and legal action. Each one made Rebecca more stressed and upset. "Maybe we should just move," Rebecca said one evening after reading Patricia's latest complaint about our excessive noise. The noise was Rebecca coughing from her chemotherapy. "No," I said firmly. "You're sick. You need to focus on getting better, not on appeasing some power-hungry HOA president." But Patricia wasn't done with us. Not even close. As Rebecca's treatment progressed, she needed more medical equipment at home. An oxygen concentrator for when her breathing was difficult. A hospital bed for when she was too weak to climb stairs. A wheelchair for her worst days. I made sure everything was as discreet as possible. The oxygen concentrator went in our bedroom. The hospital bed replaced our regular bed temporarily. The wheelchair stayed in the garage when not in use. But Patricia had her spies throughout the neighborhood, and she found out about Rebecca's medical equipment. The letter that arrived in May was the cruelest thing I'd ever read. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Stevens, Sunset Ridge Estates is a residential community, not a medical facility. Your use of the property as a home healthcare center is in violation of our community standards and is negatively impacting property values. You are hereby required to remove all medical equipment from the premises within 7 days. If you require ongoing medical care, you should consider relocating to an assisted living facility or other appropriate medical housing. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action to force your removal from the community. Sincerely, Patricia Whitman, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times before I could believe what I was seeing. Patricia was trying to force my cancer patient wife out of her own home because she needed medical equipment to survive. Rebecca was in bed recovering from her latest chemotherapy session when I showed her the letter. She read it and started crying. She wants us to leave our home because I'm sick, Rebecca whispered. That was the moment I decided Patricia Whitman had made the biggest mistake of her life. I might have been on desk duty, but I was still an FBI agent. And FBI agents know how to investigate people. I started digging into Patricia Whitman's background, and what I found was disturbing. Patricia had been involved in similar disputes at 2 previous neighborhoods before moving to Sunset Ridge. In both cases, she had targeted families with sick or disabled members, using HOA rules to harass them until they moved away. But it got worse. Patricia's financial records showed some interesting patterns. Over the past 5 years, she had purchased 4 homes in Sunset Ridge Estates at below-market prices. All 4 homes had belonged to families that Patricia had driven out with her harassment. She was using her position as HOA president to force out families, then buying their homes cheap and either reselling them for profit or renting them out. Patricia Whitman wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was running a criminal enterprise, using harassment and intimidation to manipulate the real estate market for her own profit. But I needed more evidence before I could take action. And I needed to protect Rebecca while I built my case. I hired the best civil rights attorney in the city, David Kim. He specialized in disability discrimination cases and had never lost a case against an HOA. This is one of the worst cases I've ever seen, David said after reviewing Patricia's letters. She's clearly targeting your wife because of her medical condition. That's a federal crime under the Fair Housing Act. David sent Patricia a formal letter explaining that her demands violated federal disability laws and that any further harassment would result in a lawsuit. Patricia's response was swift and vicious. She filed a lawsuit against us, claiming that our medical facility use of the property was in violation of our HOA contract and demanding that we be forced to sell our home and move out immediately. But that wasn't the worst part. In her court filing, Patricia actually wrote that Rebecca's cancer was probably fake, and that we were using a fake disability to get special treatment and lower property values. She demanded that the court order Rebecca to stop pretending to be sick or face criminal charges for fraud. When I read that filing, my hands shook with rage. Patricia had just accused my dying wife of faking cancer. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The court hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in June. Rebecca was having a good day, so she insisted on coming with me. I want that woman to see my face when the judge rules against her, Rebecca said. We arrived at the courthouse early. David met us outside and went over our strategy one more time. Remember, he said, Patricia has to prove that your medical equipment violates the HOA rules. But federal disability law trumps HOA rules every time. This should be a straightforward win for us. Patricia arrived with her own lawyer, a slimy-looking man in an expensive suit who specialized in helping HOAs get away with discrimination. As we sat in the courtroom waiting for the judge, Patricia kept staring at Rebecca with disgust. My wife was wearing a colorful headscarf to cover her hair loss from chemotherapy, and she looked thin and pale, but she held her head high with dignity. Judge Robert Martinez called the court to order, and Patricia's lawyers stood up to present their case. What happened next was so shocking that I still can't believe it actually occurred in a court of law. Patricia's lawyer called her to the witness stand and asked her to explain why she wanted us removed from the neighborhood. Your Honor, Patricia began in her sweetest fake voice, the Stevens family has turned their residential home into an unauthorized medical facility. They have oxygen machines, hospital beds, wheelchairs, and other equipment that belongs in a hospital, not a family neighborhood. Judge Martinez looked puzzled. Mrs. Whitman, Are you aware that people with medical conditions are legally allowed to have medical equipment in their homes? Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment. Yes, Your Honor, but not when they're faking it. The courtroom went silent. Excuse me? Judge Martinez said. Patricia straightened up and continued, Your Honor, I believe Mrs. Stevens is exaggerating her medical condition, possibly even faking it entirely, in order to get special treatment and make excuses for not maintaining her property properly. Rebecca gasped beside me. I put my hand on her arm to keep her calm, but inside I was furious. Patricia wasn't done. I've lived in that neighborhood for 8 years, Your Honor. I've seen truly sick people, and Mrs. Stevens doesn't look that sick to me. She can drive a car, go to stores, even work part-time. If she was really as sick as she claims, she'd be in a hospital, not living in a residential neighborhood and bothering the rest of us with her so-called medical needs. Judge Martinez was staring at Patricia in disbelief, but she kept going. Your Honor, I believe people who claim to be disabled when they're not are stealing resources from people who are truly disabled. Mrs. Stevens is committing fraud, and she should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Then Patricia said the words that sealed her fate forever. Your Honor, if Mrs. Stevens really has cancer like she claims, then maybe she should just accept her fate and stop burdening the rest of us with her fake drama. Some people just need to accept when their time is up instead of making everyone else miserable. The courtroom erupted. People in the gallery started shouting. Rebecca started crying. Judge Martinez banged his gavel repeatedly. Order in the court, he shouted. But Patricia wasn't finished. In her arrogance and cruelty, she decided to go even further. Your Honor, she said, raising her voice over the noise, if Mrs. Stevens is really dying like she claims, then maybe the kindest thing would be to put her out of her misery. We put down sick animals to end their suffering. Maybe we should consider doing the same for people who are just going to die anyway and are making everyone else's lives worse in the process. Dead silence fell over the courtroom. Patricia Whitman had just suggested, in open court, that my wife should be euthanized because her cancer was inconvenient for the neighborhood. She had just suggested the death penalty for having cancer. Judge Martinez looked like he was about to explode with rage. Mrs. Whitman, did you just suggest that this court should order the execution of a cancer patient? Patricia realized she had gone too far, but it was too late to take it back. I just meant, Your Honor, some people are just burdens on society. Sit down, Judge Martinez commanded. Sit down right now. But I had heard enough. It was time for Patricia to learn who she was really dealing with. I stood up in the courtroom gallery. Your Honor, I said in my clear official voice, I request permission to address the court. Judge Martinez looked at me curiously. And you are? I reached into my jacket and pulled out my FBI credentials, holding them up for the court to see. Special Agent Michael Stevens, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The courtroom went completely silent. Patricia's face went white as she realized what was happening. Your Honor, I continued, Mrs. Whitman has just made threats against a federal witness in open court. My wife is currently assisting the FBI in an ongoing investigation into Mrs. Whitman's criminal activities. That was a slight exaggeration. Rebecca wasn't officially a federal witness yet, but she would be soon. Furthermore, I said, Mrs. Whitman's statements constitute criminal threats against a person with disabilities, which is a federal hate crime under 18 U.S.C. Section 249. Judge Martinez nodded. Agent Stevens, please approach the bench. I walked forward and handed him my credentials. He examined them carefully, then looked back at Patricia, who was now shaking visibly. Mrs. Whitman, Judge Martinez said, you have just threatened the life of an FBI agent's wife in my courtroom. But more importantly, you have revealed a level of cruelty and callousness that shocks the conscience of this court. He turned to me. Agent Stevens, what is the nature of this investigation you mentioned? Your Honor, Mrs. Whitman has been using her position as HOA president to systematically harass and intimidate families with disabled or sick members, forcing them to sell their homes below market value, which she then purchases for her own profit. This constitutes a pattern of racketeering under the RICO Act. Patricia's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Agent Stevens can't just make accusations without evidence. I smiled. Actually, I can. I pulled out a thick folder from my briefcase. Your Honor, I have here documented evidence of Mrs. Whitman's criminal enterprise, including financial records, witness statements, and recorded conversations. Judge Martinez's eyes widened. Recorded conversations? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Whitman has been under FBI surveillance for the past 6 weeks as part of our investigation into her activities. Patricia stood up suddenly. That's illegal. You can't spy on me. Actually, Mrs. Whitman, I said calmly, we can. And we have been. Including recording your conversation yesterday with Mrs. Helen Morrison, where you stated, and I quote, "If that cancer bitch doesn't die soon, I'll make sure she wishes she had." The color drained completely from Patricia's face. Judge Martinez called for a recess and asked to meet with all attorneys in his chambers. But I requested that the hearing continue in open court, since Patricia's crimes were now a matter of public record. Your Honor, I said, I believe the court and the public have a right to hear the full extent of Mrs. Whitman's criminal activities. Judge Martinez agreed and I was sworn in as a witness. For the next hour, I presented the evidence my FBI team had gathered. Financial records showing Patricia had purchased 7 homes in the past 5 years, all from families she had harassed out of the neighborhood. She had made over $800,000 in profit from these forced sales. Recorded phone conversations where Patricia bragged to friends about getting rid of undesirable neighbors and cleaning up the neighborhood. Witness statements from 12 families who had been driven out by Patricia's harassment, including a family with an autistic child, a veteran with PTSD, and an elderly couple where the husband had Alzheimer's. Email records showing Patricia had researched the medical conditions of multiple neighbors and then targeted them with specific harassment designed to worsen their health conditions. Most damning of all, recorded conversations where Patricia discussed ways to make sick people sicker, so they would give up and move away faster. Your Honor, I concluded, Mrs. Whitman isn't just a mean neighbor. She's a criminal who has systematically targeted vulnerable people for financial gain. Her actions constitute racketeering, fraud, civil rights violations, and criminal conspiracy. Patricia sat in stunned silence as the evidence mounted against her. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. But I wasn't done yet. Your Honor, I continued, Mrs. Whitman didn't act alone. Our investigation has revealed a conspiracy involving several other individuals. I presented evidence showing that Patricia had been working with a corrupt real estate agent named Richard Blake, who helped her identify vulnerable families to target. She had also been working with Dr. Sarah Vincent, a physician who provided her with confidential medical information about neighbors, violating federal HIPAA laws. Most shocking of all, Patricia had been paying City Councilman Robert Torres to fast-track zoning changes that would force out families she targeted. This conspiracy has operated for 5 years, Your Honor, generating over $2 million in illegal profits while destroying the lives of innocent families. Judge Martinez looked horrified. Agent Stevens, are arrests planned for these co-conspirators? Yes, Your Honor. FBI agents are executing arrest warrants at this very moment. Patricia finally snapped. She jumped up from her chair and started screaming. This is all lies. I'm a respected member of this community. I've never broken any laws. That woman is faking cancer for attention, and her FBI husband is abusing his power to protect her. She pointed at Rebecca, who was sitting quietly with tears streaming down her face. Look at her. She's not even that sick. She's just a drama queen who wants everyone to feel sorry for her. People like her are a burden on society, and someone needs to do something about it. Judge Martinez banged his gavel. Mrs. Whitman, sit down immediately. But Patricia was beyond reason now. No. I won't sit down. I'm tired of pretending sick people deserve special treatment. They don't. They're weak and useless and they make life harder for everyone else. She turned to face Rebecca directly. You should be grateful that I'm trying to help you do the right thing. Stop wasting everyone's time and just die already. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Several people in the gallery started shouting at Patricia. Her own lawyer put his head in his hands. And that's when FBI agents came through the courtroom doors. Patricia Whitman, Agent Sarah Martinez announced as she entered the courtroom with 2 other agents, you are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, racketeering, fraud, and making criminal threats. Patricia's eyes went wide as she realized she was actually being arrested. No. This is a mistake. I'm the victim here. Agent Martinez approached Patricia with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I demand to speak to my lawyer. Patricia screamed. You have the right to an attorney, Agent Martinez continued. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Patricia's lawyer spoke up. Your Honor, I'm withdrawing from this case immediately. I cannot represent someone who has clearly committed federal crimes. As Agent Martinez placed the handcuffs on Patricia's wrists, Patricia made one final desperate attempt to save herself. Wait, she screamed. I have information. I can help you catch bigger criminals. I know about corruption in the city government. Mrs. Whitman, I said calmly, we already know about your co-conspirators. They're all being arrested as we speak. Patricia's face crumpled as she realized her criminal empire was completely destroyed. As the agents led her out of the courtroom, she turned back one last time and screamed at Rebecca. This is all your fault. You should have just died quietly like you were supposed to. Even in handcuffs, being arrested for federal crimes, Patricia's hatred for my sick wife was so strong that she couldn't help but reveal her true nature one more time. The courtroom door closed behind her, and Patricia Whitman was gone from our lives forever. After Patricia was removed, Judge Martinez addressed the court with obvious emotion in his voice. In 30 years on the bench, he said, I have never seen such callous disregard for human life and dignity. Mrs. Whitman's behavior today was not just legally reprehensible, but morally unconscionable. He turned to Rebecca and me. Mrs. Stevens, I want to apologize on behalf of this court and this community for what you have endured. No one should ever have to face such cruelty while battling a serious illness. Rebecca wiped away her tears and spoke for the first time during the hearing. Thank you, Your Honor. I just hope that what happened here today prevents other families from going through what we've experienced. Judge Martinez nodded. Mrs. Stevens, I'm immediately issuing a permanent restraining order preventing any member of the Sunset Ridge Estates HOA from contacting you or your husband for any reason. I'm also voiding all HOA violations and fines issued against your property. He continued, furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to pay $50,000 in damages for the emotional distress caused by their discriminatory actions. Patricia's co-conspirators were also having a very bad day. By the time our court hearing ended, Richard Blake had been arrested at his real estate office, Dr. Vincent had been arrested at her medical practice, and Councilman Torres had been arrested at City Hall. The conspiracy Patricia had built over 5 years was completely destroyed in a single morning. News of Patricia's arrest and her courtroom outburst spread quickly. By that evening, our story was on every local news channel. HOA president suggests death penalty for cancer patient, was the headline that appeared on news websites across the country. The video of Patricia screaming at Rebecca to just die already went viral on social media. Millions of people saw Patricia's hatred and cruelty, and the response was overwhelmingly supportive of our family. Disability rights groups held rallies in our support. Cancer survivors shared their own stories of discrimination. Legal experts explained how Patricia's actions violated federal civil rights laws. But the most meaningful response came from our neighbors in Sunset Ridge Estates. That evening, we came home to find dozens of neighbors gathered on our front lawn. They had organized a show of support for Rebecca, bringing flowers, cards, and home-cooked meals. Mrs. Johnson, our next-door neighbor, spoke for the group. Rebecca and Michael, she said, we are so sorry for what Patricia put you through. We should have spoken up sooner. We should have protected you. Many of our neighbors were crying as they shared their own experiences with Patricia's harassment. She threatened to have my son arrested because he's autistic and sometimes makes noise, said Mrs. Rodriguez. She tried to get us evicted because my husband's PTSD medications were delivered by mail, added Mr. Thompson. She told me my mother couldn't visit because her walker was unsightly, said young Mrs. Kim. 4 years, Patricia had terrorized our entire neighborhood, and everyone had been too afraid to fight back. But seeing Rebecca's courage in court had inspired them to finally speak out. The neighbors had also organized a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely and replace it with a community association focused on mutual support rather than enforcement of arbitrary rules. We want to build the kind of neighborhood where families like yours are supported and protected, Mrs. Johnson said. Patricia's federal trial began 3 months later. By then, the FBI investigation had uncovered even more evidence of her crimes. She had targeted over 20 families in 3 different neighborhoods over 8 years. Her total profits from forced home sales exceeded $3 million. She had also been involved in insurance fraud, filing false claims about property damage to homes she was targeting for harassment. Most disturbing of all, investigators found evidence that Patricia had researched ways to worsen her victims' medical conditions. She had ordered books about triggering asthma attacks, worsening heart conditions, and causing psychological trauma in vulnerable people. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that she was mentally ill and not responsible for her actions. But the evidence showed clear premeditation and careful planning over many years. Rebecca testified at the trial, describing in detail how Patricia's harassment had affected her cancer treatment and recovery. There were days, Rebecca said from the witness stand, When dealing with Mrs. Whitman's cruelty was harder than dealing with chemotherapy. Cancer was trying to kill my body, but Mrs. Whitman was trying to kill my spirit. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Patricia's sentencing hearing was packed with her victims and their families. Over 30 people had come to tell the judge how Patricia's actions had affected their lives. One by one they shared their stories. An elderly man whose wife died of a heart attack after Patricia's harassment caused her unbearable stress. A mother whose autistic child stopped speaking for months after Patricia's cruel comments about his condition. A veteran who attempted suicide after Patricia's campaign to have him evicted from his home. When it was Rebecca's turn to speak, she addressed Patricia directly. "Mrs. Whitman," Rebecca said, "you tried to destroy my family because my illness was inconvenient for you. You wanted me to die quietly so you could profit from our suffering. But I'm still here. My cancer is in remission, my marriage is stronger than ever, and our community is healing from the damage you caused." Rebecca paused, then continued with grace that amazed everyone in the courtroom. "I forgive you for what you did to me. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying hatred in my heart would only hurt me more. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the pain you've caused and find a way to become a better person." Patricia stared at Rebecca with confusion. She clearly couldn't understand how someone she had treated so cruelly could show her such mercy. Judge Williams then announced Patricia's sentence. 15 years in federal prison for racketeering and civil rights violations. 5 years additional for fraud and conspiracy. Full restitution to all victims, totaling over $4 million. Patricia would be 77 years old when she was released from prison. Her criminal empire was gone, her co-conspirators were also facing lengthy prison sentences, and she had lost everything. As the marshals led Patricia away in shackles, she turned back one final time. But instead of the hatred and cruelty we had seen before, there was just emptiness in her eyes. The reality of what she had done and what she had lost was finally sinking in. 2 years have passed since Patricia's arrest. Rebecca's cancer is in full remission, and her doctors are optimistic about her long-term prognosis. She returned to teaching last fall, and her students welcomed her back with a celebration that made her cry happy tears. The experience of fighting both cancer and Patricia's harassment had made Rebecca even more compassionate and determined to help others. Rebecca now speaks at conferences about disability rights and healthcare advocacy. She's become a powerful voice for people who face discrimination because of their medical conditions. "What happened to us was terrible," she tells audiences, "but it taught us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they stand up for what's right. I returned to active duty with the FBI, but my perspective on my work has changed." The case against Patricia and her co-conspirators was the most personally satisfying case of my career, not because of the complexity or danger, but because it protected vulnerable people from a predator. I now specialize in civil rights crimes, focusing on cases where people abuse positions of power to harm those who can't defend themselves. Sunset Ridge Estates is a completely different place now. The HOA was dissolved and replaced with a community association that focuses on helping neighbors rather than harassing them. Mrs. Johnson was elected as the community association president, and her first initiative was to establish a fund to help neighbors with disabilities or serious illnesses. The association sponsors regular community events, block parties, holiday celebrations, and support groups for families dealing with medical challenges. Most importantly, the community has embraced the principle that everyone belongs, regardless of their physical condition, race, religion, or economic status. The house that Patricia used to live in was sold to a lovely family with twin boys who have Down syndrome. When some prospective buyers expressed concerns about living near children with disabilities, the entire neighborhood rallied to support the family and ensure they felt welcome. "This is exactly the kind of family we want in our community," Mrs. Johnson told the local newspaper. "We've learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." Through the federal prison system, I occasionally receive updates about Patricia's situation in prison. She's not adjusting well. Patricia spent her entire adult life controlling and intimidating others. In prison, she has no power, no authority, and no one who cares about her opinions. The other inmates know why she's there. Targeting sick people and families with disabilities is considered particularly despicable even in prison. Patricia has been placed in protective custody multiple times after conflicts with other prisoners who don't appreciate her attitude toward vulnerable people. She's filed dozens of complaints about her treatment, demanded special accommodations, and tried to manipulate prison staff the same way she manipulated her HOA. None of it has worked. Prison officials describe Patricia as unrepentant and manipulative, with no genuine understanding of why her actions were wrong. She still blames Rebecca and me for her situation. In her twisted mind, we're the villains who destroyed her life, not the victims of her criminal conspiracy. Some people never learn. Our case against Patricia has had effects far beyond Sunset Ridge Estates. The media attention led to investigations of abusive HOAs across the country. Federal legislation was introduced to strengthen protections for people with disabilities in homeowner associations. The Rebecca Stevens Act would make it a federal crime for HOAs to discriminate against residents based on medical conditions. Law enforcement agencies have created task forces to investigate HOA corruption and abuse. Patricia's case became a model for how to build federal cases against corrupt community leaders. Most importantly, thousands of families have found the courage to fight back against HOA harassment after seeing what happened to Patricia and her co-conspirators. Our lawyer, David Kim, now specializes in HOA discrimination cases and has won significant settlements for dozens of families. The Patricia Whitman case changed everything, he told a reporter. It showed that even the most powerful neighborhood bullies can be held accountable for their crimes. Looking back on everything that happened, I've learned some important lessons about human nature, justice, and the power of standing up to bullies. First, people like Patricia count on their victims staying silent. They use intimidation and legal threats to make people afraid to fight back. But when someone finally stands up to them, their power evaporates quickly. Second, evil often hides behind respectability. Patricia presented herself as a pillar of the community, concerned about property values and neighborhood standards. In reality, she was a criminal who targeted vulnerable people for profit. Third, ordinary people are capable of extraordinary cruelty when they dehumanize others. Patricia didn't see Rebecca as a human being deserving of compassion. She saw her as an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. Fourth, communities have the power to protect their most vulnerable members, but only if they choose to act. For years, our neighbors knew Patricia was wrong, but they stayed silent out of fear. When they finally spoke up, they were able to create positive change. Finally, justice is possible, but it requires courage, persistence, and sometimes a little luck. If I hadn't been an FBI agent, Patricia might have succeeded in driving us out of our home. But because I had the resources and knowledge to fight back, we were able to expose her crimes and protect other families. Last month, Rebecca and I welcomed a daughter into the world. We named her Emma Hope Stevens, and she's already brought so much joy into our lives. Emma will grow up in a community that values inclusion and compassion. She'll learn that being different isn't something to be ashamed of, but something to be celebrated. When Emma is old enough, we'll tell her the story of how her mother fought both cancer and a cruel woman who wanted to destroy our family. We'll teach her that good people must stand up to bullies, even when it's scary and difficult. Most importantly, we'll make sure Emma knows that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their physical condition, race, religion, or any other characteristic that makes them different. Emma will never know a world where people like Patricia Whitman have unchecked power to terrorize their neighbors. Because of what her mother went through, Emma will inherit a more just and compassionate community. 6 months ago, I received an unexpected phone call from the federal prison where Patricia is serving her sentence. "Agent Stevens," the warden said, "Patricia Whitman is requesting a meeting with you and your wife. She claims she has important information about other criminal activities." I was immediately suspicious. What kind of information? She won't say. She insists she'll only talk to you and your wife in person. Rebecca and I discussed it and decided to take the meeting. We were curious about what Patricia might have to say after 3 years in prison. The federal prison was a stark, gray building surrounded by high walls and razor wire. As we went through security and were escorted to the visiting room, I wondered if Patricia had genuinely changed or if this was another manipulation. Patricia entered the visiting room wearing an orange prison uniform, her hair now completely gray and unkempt. The proud, imperious woman who had terrorized our neighborhood was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and defeated. She sat across from us at a metal table, her hands folded in front of her. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. Rebecca leaned forward. "What did you want to tell us, Patricia?" Patricia was silent for a long moment, then looked directly at Rebecca with tears in her eyes. "I'm dying," she said simply. The words hung in the air between us. "The prison doctors found a tumor in my brain 6 months ago. It's aggressive and it's growing. They give me maybe a year, probably less." I felt a complex mix of emotions. This woman had tried to destroy my family, had suggested my wife should die, and now she was facing her own mortality. "I'm sorry to hear that," Rebecca said with genuine compassion. Patricia looked surprised by Rebecca's response. You're sorry? After everything I did to you? Yes, Rebecca said. I wouldn't wish cancer on anyone, not even you. Patricia started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. I don't understand you, she said through her tears. I was so cruel to you. I tried to force you out of your home while you were fighting for your life. I said terrible things about you dying. How can you be kind to me now? Rebecca reached across the table and placed her hand over Patricia's. Because that's who I choose to be, she said. What you did was wrong, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve basic human compassion now. Patricia cried harder. I've been in this place for 3 years and no one has shown me any kindness. No one visits me. My children won't speak to me. I have no friends left. You're the first person to treat me like a human being in so long. Patricia, I said, why did you really ask us here? It wasn't just to tell us about your diagnosis. Patricia wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. I wanted to apologize, she said. Really apologize, not the fake apologies I tried during my trial. I wanted to tell you both that I know what I did was unforgivable. She looked at Rebecca. You were fighting cancer, and instead of helping you or even just leaving you alone, I tried to make your life worse. I targeted you because you were vulnerable, and I convinced myself that was okay because you were different from what I thought belonged in my neighborhood. Patricia's voice broke. I spent so many years hating people for being different that I forgot how to be human myself. I became a monster and I destroyed so many lives, including my own. What changed? Rebecca asked gently. Getting cancer myself, Patricia said. Suddenly I'm the sick one. I'm the one who's weak and vulnerable. I'm the one who needs help and compassion. And I realize now what I put you through, what I put all those families through. She paused, then continued. In here, I've met women who committed terrible crimes but still have families who love them, who visit them, who believe they can change. But not me. I drove everyone away with my hatred and cruelty. I'm going to die alone because of the choices I made. It's not too late to change, Rebecca said. Patricia shook her head. Yes, it is. My children hate me. My grandchildren don't even know my name. The families I hurt will never forgive me and they shouldn't. I destroyed too much to ever make it right. But you can still choose how to spend whatever time you have left, I said. Patricia nodded. That's why I asked you here. I want to tell you about other people like me, other HOA presidents and community leaders who are targeting vulnerable families. I want to help you stop them before they destroy more lives. Over the next 2 hours, Patricia provided detailed information about a network of corrupt HOA officials across 3 states. She had been in contact with them for years, sharing strategies for forcing out undesirable residents. She gave us names, addresses, financial records, and recorded conversations. It was enough evidence to launch federal investigations into dozens of corrupt community leaders. There's a woman in Phoenix who's doing exactly what I did, Patricia said. Margaret Torres. She's targeting families with autistic children, trying to force them out so she can buy their homes cheap. And in Dallas, there's a man named Robert Chin who specializes in harassing elderly residents with dementia. He gets them declared incompetent and then manipulates their families into selling. Patricia had kept meticulous records of her criminal network, thinking she might need leverage against her co-conspirators someday. Now she was turning over everything to help us protect other families. This information could save dozens of families from what we went through, I told Rebecca as we reviewed Patricia's files. It's the least I can do, Patricia said. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but maybe it can prevent some other families from suffering. As we prepared to leave, Patricia had one final request. Rebecca, she said, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you visit me again? I don't have anyone else and I'd like to not die completely alone. Rebecca looked at me then back at Patricia. Yes, she said. I'll visit you. Patricia started crying again. What? Why would you do that for me? Because everyone deserves to die with dignity, Rebecca said. Even you. The information Patricia provided led to the largest HOA corruption investigation in FBI history. We called it Operation Clean Sweep. Over 6 months, federal agents investigated corrupt community leaders in 12 states. The evidence Patricia had provided was crucial in building cases against 37 defendants. Margaret Torres in Phoenix was arrested while in the middle of harassing a family whose 8-year-old son had autism. She had been following the same playbook Patricia had used, filing false complaints and threatening legal action to force the family out. Robert Chin in Dallas was caught on surveillance cameras breaking into the home of an elderly woman with Alzheimer's, planting evidence to support his claims that she was an unfit resident. The network Patricia had exposed included real estate agents, corrupt city officials, medical professionals who violated patient privacy, and even some judges who accepted bribes to rule against targeted families. All of them were arrested and charged with federal crimes. Patricia Whitman's cooperation has been invaluable, my supervisor told the media. Her inside knowledge of this criminal network has allowed us to protect hundreds of vulnerable families. It was ironic that the woman who had caused us so much pain was now helping us protect other families from similar abuse. True to her word, Rebecca visited Patricia in prison every few weeks during her final months. I often went with her, and we watched Patricia's health decline rapidly. The brain tumor was aggressive, and Patricia was often confused and weak. But during her lucid moments, she continued to provide information about other corrupt officials. More importantly, she seemed to find peace in her final months that she had never had in her life. I spent so many years being angry and hateful, she told Rebecca during one visit. I was always looking for people to blame for my problems, people to punish because they were different from me. But now I see that the person I was really angry at was myself. I hated my life, but instead of trying to make it better, I tried to make other people's lives worse. Patricia had started reading books about forgiveness and redemption. She had written letters to every family she had hurt, taking full responsibility for her actions and expressing genuine remorse. Most of the families didn't respond to her letters, which was understandable. But a few wrote back, offering forgiveness and wishing her peace in her final days. I don't deserve their forgiveness, Patricia told us. But I'm grateful for it anyway. Patricia died on a Tuesday morning in March, with Rebecca holding her hand in the prison medical facility. Her final words were, "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." Despite everything she had done to us, Rebecca wept for Patricia. She had watched a cruel, hate-filled woman transform into someone capable of remorse and self-reflection in her final months. She died as a better person than she lived, Rebecca said afterward. Patricia's children refused to claim her body or arrange a funeral. She would have been buried in an unmarked prison grave if Rebecca hadn't intervened. Rebecca arranged for a simple funeral service and burial in a small cemetery near our home. Only a few people attended, Rebecca and me, our pastor, and 2 other families Patricia had hurt who had found it in their hearts to forgive her. Patricia Whitman caused great pain in her life, our pastor said at the service. But in her final months, she chose to help protect other families from the kind of harm she had caused. That doesn't erase the pain she inflicted, but it shows that even the most hardened hearts can change. 5 years have passed since Patricia's death. The federal investigations her information made possible have led to the conviction of over 50 corrupt HOA officials and their co-conspirators. The Rebecca Stevens Act was signed into law, providing federal protections for people with disabilities who face HOA discrimination. Thousands of families have been protected by this legislation. Emma is now 3 years old, healthy and happy. She loves books, puzzles, and helping her mother in the garden. She's growing up in a community that values kindness and inclusion above all else. Rebecca's cancer remains in remission, and she's stronger than ever. She's become a national advocate for disability rights and has helped pass similar legislation in 12 states. I continue to work civil rights cases for the FBI, focusing on protecting vulnerable people from those who would abuse their power. Our neighborhood has become a model for inclusive communities. We have families of all backgrounds, including several families with disabled members who moved here specifically because they knew they would be welcomed and supported. The house Patricia used to live in is now home to the Morrison family, whose daughter has cerebral palsy. Little Sarah Morrison is one of Emma's best friends, and watching them play together reminds me daily of how much our community has changed. As I finish writing this story, I'm sitting in our backyard watching Emma and Sarah Morrison play in the garden Rebecca has created. The flowers are beautiful, the vegetables are thriving, and the laughter of children fills the air. This is what Patricia Whitman tried to destroy. Not just our family's happiness, but the very idea that communities should welcome and support their most vulnerable members. She failed completely. Not only did we survive her attacks, we thrived. Our community became stronger and more inclusive. Federal laws were changed to protect other families. Corrupt officials across the country were brought to justice. Most remarkably, Patricia herself was transformed in her final months from a hate-filled predator into someone capable of remorse and redemption. That doesn't excuse what she did to us and so many other families. The pain she caused was real and lasting. But it shows that even the worst people are capable of change if they choose to face the truth about themselves. The real victory wasn't Patricia's arrest or conviction or death. The real victory was building something better from the ashes of what she tried to destroy. Today, Emma will never know a world where HOA Karens like Patricia have unchecked power to terrorize their neighbors. She'll grow up in a community that celebrates differences instead of punishing them. She'll learn that when good people stand together, they can overcome any evil. And she'll understand that true strength isn't about having power over others, but about using whatever power you have to protect those who need protection. Patricia Whitman thought she could destroy us with her hatred. Instead, she taught us the power of love. And that's a lesson Emma will carry with her for the rest of her life.